You're listening to the Cash Flow Academy podcast with Andy Tanner, your source for investing made easy. Here's Andy Tanner.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Academy podcast. I'm your host, Andy Tanner. This is where we do everything we can. We do our very best to make investing simple. And we've got such a great show here today. I'm very privileged. We have Paul Epstein with us. And Paul was he's an executive for sports, NFL, NBA, big time executive stuff. And he really found his calling in, like I did, in the private sector as far as being an author, being a leader, being a teacher, and helping people with personal development. He's got a really solid book out now called The Power of Playing Offense, a leader's playbook for personal and team transformation. He's coming out with a really exciting one that's going to be a staple in everyone's library, especially if you're an investor, because it's all about making decisions. So his new book, 2023, is Better Decisions Faster. And so this is gold for you and I. And you'll live through, those of you that follow me know we have to live through sports metaphors. Now we're really in trouble. So with that, Paul, welcome to the podcast, and we're going to have a lot of fun today, I'm sure. Thanks for coming.
Absolutely, Andy. Fired up to be here.
So first of all, let's just talk a little bit about your background briefly so people can, grow confidence in who they're about to learn from. What is it that brought you into Major League Sports, first of all, professional sports, and then, the transition to author speaker? What brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're talking to a lot of investors, whether physically, metaphorically, like this is an investment conversation. We could also call it like, where do we place our bets in life? And so for me, one of those earliest bets was I knew I had this gift from a very young age, whether family, friends, other people can kind of tell you where they see some gifts and skills and talents, even at a relatively young age. So for me, communication, what turned into sales, what turned into influence, like even in my college years, I remember that being called out a lot, even what I studied, what gravitated most toward me. But what didn't exist back then, so I did my undergrad at SC back in the Pete Carroll days. So for those that are sports fans, those were the glory days for us. Absolutely, with Reggie Bush and Leinart and all those guys. But what didn't exist was sports management. It was a very small niche thing. Like, in other words, can I go to school to study this thing called sports, but not to be the player, to be the business executive? And a couple of schools, a lot on the East Coast and smaller universities, they had that. But for me, in a big school like USC, it just wasn't there. Today it is. This is a couple decades ago. And so when I realized, after working at a Fortune 10 company for about a year and a half after I graduated, holy smokes, there's this whole side to this space that I love so much. Because, if a lot of folks listening in are sports fans, like you grow up and there's usually like, hey, I was throwing the ball with my pops in the backyard. And we use those lifelong memories if this is what you choose to consume. And I loved sports. And then when I was like, oh my gosh, I can combine multiple things that I have a passion for. Like the space is sports and I'm pretty damn good at selling things. So, how do we bring those two worlds together? So the quick backstory was, in sports, if there's a butt in every seat, people like me didn't exist. So when I worked in the NBA in Los Angeles, which is where I broke in, all my friends were like, why don't you work for the Lakers? Well, at the time, those were the Kobe and Shaq days. They didn't need a guy like Paul. But you know who did? The team on the other side of the hallway, the LA Clippers. And imagine this, a year before you start, ESPN calls you the worst brand in sports. Yeah. And then your second week on the job, Sports Illustrated says you're the worst franchise in sports history. Try selling that.
Wow.
And that was my introduction, brother. And what I love about this, I use this metaphor. That's where I learned how to play offense in a defensive environment.
Yeah.
Right? Like if adversity and setbacks and hurdles and obstacles, if that's the defense, but I can't control any of that stuff. I couldn't control whether the Clippers won games or not. I still had a quota. I had a goal and we had to move units. And so that kind of walking through fire introduction leads me to eventually sales leadership, New Orleans. We saved the team from permanent relocation. Sacramento Kings back in the Maloof era. It was a very kind of toxic environment. Bang, league-wide labor lockout, and I was in charge of company culture. So how do you manage morale when it feels like people's livelihoods are taken away. And just another example, right? And then I end up in the NFL league office. We broke some Super Bowl revenue records. And I think the really cool thing from my time at the Niners, where eventually I rose up to the CRO rank, so heading up revenue, dude, I was there when Colin Kaepernick kneeled. And so I was the head of sales and service facing 70,000 fans in what arguably is one of the most controversial events. It's not even a sports thing. This was not ESPN. This was CNN. This was Fox. This was like, are you disrespecting the flag? Like it was deep, man.
Yeah.
And so I just share all that to say that like life isn't easy. Business isn't easy. I'm so happy that I had to walk through all those fires because it made me who I am today. And then why I'm now talking to you as an author and speaker and thought leader versus continuing on the sports track. I had a leadership retreat that changed my life. Back in 2016, team president of the Niners takes all of his reports, of which I was one of them, off site. I started to understand my why, my core values. And unlike a lot of retreats where they're inspiring and then you get back into your life and then you reflect back and they're nothing more than a sugar high, right? Like we don't have a lot of sustainable change. And that's why I do what I do, is to give people 365 impact ways to kind of follow that in-person experience up. But I'll tell you, what really obsessed me after that was I wasn't willing to settle for the North Star. Because why and values could just be words on a wall. They're inspiring and they get you through the blue skies. What I really got obsessed about is how the hell do I apply these things on Monday morning? And if I could figure out how to connect this North Star and this pieces of identity that I started to understand about myself and tie it to my decisions and actions, that was the game that I got obsessed about. And that's what led to my Jerry Maguire leap.
That's fantastic stuff. Let's hop in then and talk about, just get right into the central core about making better decisions. So I was the worst basketball player in the history of my university, but I had a great coach. His name was Rick Majerus. And I got to know a lot of NBA guys. And I'm still friends with them today. So it was kind of natural as my kids got older, who's going to be the coach. And today, I love being an assistant coach. And they go, well, Andy, why don't you ever take a head job? Why don't you do it? And I said, well, the burden of the coach is decisiveness. In other words, he decides everything. You're making decisions all the time. That is the number one thing when you talk about the head coach. The burden he carries more than anything else is the decisiveness of the job. Who plays, who doesn't play, what you're going to run. And basically in today's sports environment, that means you're going to piss everybody off. No one will be happy. And I like to make people happy. So I chose not to take that leadership. And I instead chose to take business leadership, where I can do a much better job of making people happy. But in investing, we're basically conducting transactions. They have a lot of risk to them. There can be logic, there can be emotion, there can be gut feelings. All this stuff plays in with all these sides of our brain and all the chemistry that goes on. Get right to the core of it. Tell us, we have this book, Better Decisions Faster. Why the time crunch? Why have to make decisions faster? Because you do, right?
100%. And I'm talking to every single person listening in right now, because this is a fundamental truth of a research statistic that we just cannot deny. The average adult makes 35,000 decisions in a day.
Wow.
So you and I, we make 35,000 decisions in a day.
No wonder I'm going to bed tired.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, imagine if we actually had to be intentional and like there's energy that's expended on some versus others. So I kind of think of them as three categories of decisions. There's a lot that are on autopilot. Thank goodness. We don't have the capacity to process 35,000 things in depth per day. So this could include brushing your teeth, turning left into the driveway, some nominal thing you're going to buy, like what kind of bread you're going to purchase, what kind of gas you put in the car, like things that aren't going to just drain you, right? So a lot of them are in that bucket. Then there's these kind of momentary things of like mindset, mood, energy, attitude, effort, which is very important. And that's kind of a through line. But really, when I write a book called Better Decisions Faster, it was for the third category of decisions. These are the most rare by number, but the most critical in consequence and value. And so for me, in the investing world, this literally could be, what do you choose to invest in when you have this binary option, A versus B. Do I do the deal or not? Do I partner with this person or not? Career choices, strategic choices, health choices, relationship choices, like A versus B. When it's a binary game, what's your playbook? Like, do you have a process and system? And if I'm talking to a lot of investors, maybe they think of financial investments very strategically. Are you putting the same rigor to who you're going to spend time with? Who you're going, right? I think the way that we think about certain other types of decisions, what's our process? What's our system? And so I thought about, could there be a universal solution in the sense of how we step into the most critical forks in the road in business and life? And so what I've formulated, and this came through it was years of researching after my first book, I kept getting asked, what's the number one separator between those that play offense versus those that play defense? And as I distilled it down and certain themes started to bubble up, I really got to a point where I'm like, oh my gosh, life is really a game of decisions and actions. And whether we take action or not is a decision in and of itself. So therefore, decisions are truly the lowest common denominator. And when I challenge groups, so I'm inviting everybody into this retrospective question right now, audit your past decisions for better or worse. Tell me, are you climbing the right ladder? Yeah, how's the health going? How are the relationships in your life? Like, and if you tell me that you've been making great decisions, then I think you're going to have a pretty damn healthy life.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, hey, and I'm not judging it. I've made hundreds of bad decisions. Like, nobody is perfect. But if you're aware of those and you're committed to getting better, that's kind of where I think about the power of the future of our decisions. So now to really drill into why better, why faster, the application method that my team and I really created back in our thought leadership laboratory, I call it the head, heart, hands equation. So if you simplify this, head is your mindset, heart is your authenticity. So that's your truth. It's your no BS zone, right? And then hands are your action. So when deciding whether to use your hands, in other words, whether deciding to take action or not, whether to make the investment or not, there's two checkpoints. Your head and your heart. So the equation is head plus heart equals hands. If I know what I think, that's the head check-in. What do I feel? That's the heart check-in. And it's not an either or. So I'm talking to the logic side and I'm talking to the emotion side. I'm not telling you one is more important. I'm saying we're missing the mark if we only focus on one. It's a yes and. So when both your head and your heart are on board, that's a green light. You attack, man. Like, that's where you pull the triggers. That's where you place your bets. That's where you make the investments, because your head and your heart are green lights. When only one of the two is on board, that's a yellow light. You got to try to solve for the gap. And then obviously a red light is when neither is on board. So when I write a playbook like Better Decisions Faster, I'm doing it so that every person listening in can seize more green lights in their life. Populate your life with more greens. Now that you're aware, stop running reds. Because you know what reds are over 6, 12, 24, 48 months? It's how people get stuck, burned out, lost, fatigued, unhappy, unfulfilled. That's a byproduct of running a bunch of red lights because we were unaware and we wonder how the heck we got there. So the book is more greens, stop running reds, and here's the playbook for how you navigate the messy middle of yellow.
Man, that's power, man. That's right in the pocket. You know, as I was listening to you, boy, a flood of things came to my mind. So if I'd like to share I'd like to share what I'd learned by listening with some listeners, what I took from that. First thing I heard you say was the idea that we would go back and audit some of our decisions. And I think that's such a powerful notion in today's world, because there's certainly unfairness in the world. There's certainly, like all of us, you have health problems, or you have a boss who's a raging maniac, or you marry the devil's sister, or whatever your problems might be. So there is some victimhood we could find if we looked for it. But what's interesting is the lens at which you put this in, of saying, well, perhaps I'm not a product of my environment so much as I'm a product of my decisions. That's pretty empowering to me. That's kind of a thought like that. Like, if I could grab on that thought, okay, wait, it's not the government or who the president is or is not, or it's not all this circumstantial stuff. It's really, I'm a product of the decisions I've made this far. What I think that does is bring a lot of weight to what you're doing and a lot of opportunity for people to gain power immediately. So that's the first thing I kind of picked up when you said audit your decisions. That's a pretty powerful idea. The second thing is with this equation, what if everyone, looking out there realized that making decisions is a skill? Like, this is something that I could go and work on. And so, I often, I don't bring people on the podcast, just to fill space, guys. You guys know that have been listeners for years. One of the things we do is we build our library. And I try to find guys that can help us with skills. So when you consider on one hand, the weight, like as important as any details of a formula, it's understanding the weight of how big this is to us in our lives, the power it gives us, right? And then the idea that we could work on ourselves in this area. Imagine if you had a magic pill you could take to just automatically make better decisions. Even if you weren't right 100% of the time, you're right 90% of the time, your life changes. So I'm pretty aggressive. And that's the third thing that I heard him say with green lights, is nothing happens without doing stuff. Indecision it's a freaking showstopper. And I tell my basketball players, do the wrong thing, but do something, right? And make a freaking decision is better than no decision. So if that's true, let's gain that skill. And I have some good news for you. Paul, I had a chance to speak to him before, and I always say to people, you guys know how I sell books. If you had a chance to sit down with someone who had to deal with what he's dealt with, if you had to sell the Clippers before Blake Griffin and Andre Miller, right? Andre's a buddy of mine, so I got to give Andre a shout out, man. So Dre, you're the man. But imagine being able to take him to dinner. Would you buy dinner for Paul? Would you like him to bend your ear and bend his ear and dissect his experience? Well, I'll tell you what, you might spring $150 on steaks and drinks for Paul. Hey, go to Amazon.com and you'll get much, 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 much more. I know as an author, I put my heart and soul into it. That's better than a dinner with Paul. So, get that thing pre-ordered, better decision faster. And the green lights of playing offense. Certainly we want to defend our portfolio, but if I don't buy anything, if I don't have a green light, I'm kind of cooked. So those are the three things I took from it, is the gravity and the weight of my decisions and the empowerment of it all. The idea that this is a skill, and then the thing that, hey, I could develop this by getting guys like Paul in my life. Fantastic stuff. What's the toughest decision you've ever had to make?
Well, the biggest weight, to use some of your words, taking that leap of faith out of sports was a pretty
big decision,
big one. And to be honest, ever since then, equally as significant and massive and sizable decisions have been in my future as well since that day. But they've kind of come easy, because my thought, and to use a cliche of tearing through the muscle, I think once you tear through it, it becomes a lot more fluid after that, right? Like that initial tear is always going to feel there's the biggest gap and the biggest tension. But then after that, you're like, all right, cool. Like there's these incremental 1%ers, right? But that initial piece of, am I stepping into this critical fork in the road with unshakable confidence? And I'm telling you right now, brother, like I have a playbook, like the subtitle of Better Decisions Faster is Unshakable Confidence When You Need It Most. Those critical forks in the road in life. And the reason that I stand firm on that is because there were chapters of my life where I didn't have the greatest confidence. I didn't.
Yeah.
So if I learned how to be more confident, I had to put in the reps to become more confident. I had to put in the reps of good and bad decisions both, and learn from them, audit them, analyze them. What worked, what didn't, curiosity, and all of these things, kind of that beginner's mindset. No matter how many trophies are in the case, I'm always a beginner. I'm always learning.
Yeah.
And those are the keys, right? So when you say, what was the biggest decision? It was the Jerry Maguire leap. And I'll tell you, part of it is your identity. I honestly, I had to look back and say, like, am I the sports guy? Like, what would I be without this?
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking the cool social, like, oh, who would be your friend? Oh, do you still have the red carpets rolled out? And of course, my wife loves all the red carpets, all that stuff. What the access was that industry gained, right? Being in the NFL commissioner suite for a Super Bowl. I mean, like, I could keep going. We got married on the field of Levi Stadium a month after Super Bowl 50, like real talk. And it was her idea, I swear. So with a background like that, you're like, man, why the heck are you not still in that space? And it's when I realized, after discovering who I was, my why and my values, I said, oh my gosh, Paul, you're showing up as two different people. There's a work you and a personal you. And once I started to understand who I was and I wanted to become one person, I was like, man, I'm not sure if this industry is for me. I'm a fan, but I'm bigger than this. Like, I don't want my identity to forever just be the sports guy. Like, I want to do things that fulfill Paul and attack my passion and my purpose and drive impact and leave people better than I found them. And, it connected me to my late father, who I lost at 19, and he was an educator. And I'm like, I want to help people. And I'm mitigating my impact in this industry. I can create more impact somewhere else. And so I basically just created a system to make values-based decisions. Mm-hmm. Once I knew my values, I started to take big swings of the bat. Impact is my strongest value. And this was the question: can I create more impact inside this industry or beyond? And when I looked at it as a box and I said, is the impact rater inside of the box, AKA the sports industry, or outside of the box? That's when the decision became easy. But the process to step through that was the big, hard, bold decision.
So that's your biggest decision. Let's talk a little bit about the decisions our listeners are going to be making. Let's say that someone has been struggling to invest, or struggling with the idea of becoming an entrepreneur, or really struggling to commit to it. The power of decision to just say, hey, I'm going to do something. That's a big deal. Anything you would say to our listeners about that idea? I love the idea of, the power of playing offense is an assertive mindset to me. It's the power of saying, look, let's freaking throw the football down the field. Let's drive to the bucket. Let's get something done. Let's not wait for life to come to us. It's a very assertive message. What would you say to people that have the fear? Because, my head says easy. Like, this is an easy one. Work for money, money work for me. That life takes no time in the head, right? And in the heart, I want the freedom, all this, but I'm also feeling that fear in my heart at the same time. And some people are paralyzed by fear. They lack confidence. And to me, confidence is kind of knowing the outcome. Like, when I'm at the free throw line, I couldn't jump, I couldn't shoot, but I could foul. So I got my school paid for. But at the free throw line, I wasn't bad. And I just felt like I'm going to make this. I wasn't worried about it. Yeah. What is this, this empowerment of confidence to be able to make a decision? Any tips on, I have a bunch I use, but I'm always interested. How do you replace fear with confidence in your life? And how would you write about that for people?
100%. A couple things to call out there. For one, let's call out what's normal. What makes you and I normal? Fear, risk avoidance, self-doubt, not having that's normal. Like, I think sometimes we think of ourselves as weaker human beings when we feel these negative emotions. I actually think that means you're on the right track because you care. Like, if you don't care, you're not going to be afraid, right? Like, if it's like in a relationship or that you're not invested in, and if it's on the brinks of no longer having them, you're not going to be that worried because you just don't care. Yeah. So when you care, you're trying to make it work. You're trying to make the right call. You're trying to make a better decision faster, right? So I think let's have a little bit more grace with ourselves about fear is okay. Risk is okay. It actually means that you care about the stakes and you want a positive outcome. That's awesome. So now let's talk about how do you get the best possible outcome. So I just wanted to call that out first. The other part of it too is, if confidence at the most critical forks in the road, I think when folks are making a lot of these big decisions, there's a couple of pieces. I think we live in a go, 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 do world, right? So in the head, heart, hands, where I think connecting all three is the key, I think the biggest gap is the heart. right? Like we're trying to be strategic and make the smart decision. That's the head. And then you called something out too, which is nothing in life happens without action. So we do. Sometimes the gap is, do I believe in what I'm doing? And that belief is the heart, right? The smart is like, all right, cool. Like I this sounds like it's going to be a good thing. So then let me go. But if I don't feel a greater purpose, if there's no greater why in the action, then it's kind of a hollow, unfulfilling path. And over time, here's why we need to be making these better decisions faster is because when we're avoiding the heart, my thought process here is that we're going to lack resilience, right? Like think of a boxing analogy. If adversity is going to knock us down, do you have a deeper reason to get up off the mat? And the heart is the reason. So whether it's an investment, whether it's a relationship, any type of decision that everybody listening in is making, like you got to fully, like for it to be a green light, your heart has to be on board. Yeah. And I'll also explain one last thing too, because I think most of business investments and beyond, there's a lot of yellow lights out there. Here's the problem with yellow lights. And there's two types. I think one is a good thing. My advice, if your heart is on board, is to stay in the fight, right? Like I have a lot of folks that let's say they're in charitable causes, they're kind of like in the nonprofit space. And they would say, like, even as an investor, sometimes it's very heart forward. Like my heart wants this, but damn, is this a good financial play? And I would just say, like, stay in that fight and try to figure out the ways where your head can join for the party. Because I think the hard one is to get your heart on board. But let me talk about the opposite yellow light. And this is where I think we make too many decisions. Your head says yes, and your heart is not in. So if you're leading a team, this for me was a top seller, a top producer, keep them on the team. But the heart was like, dude, they're toxic. Like they're hurting the people to their left and right. They're kind of and I'll keep it clean. I don't know what the language of this show is, but like we have a lot of top performers. Okay, then I'll just keep it at what I said. So look, we have a lot of difficult people and our head says, keep them. Your heart knows they're not a keeper. And you know what that yellow light is? Because your heart's not going to change. I promise you, your heart's not going to change tomorrow, next week, or the next month. You already know the truth. You're just, we're afraid to pull the trigger and make the call. In this case, maybe that person shouldn't be on the team. And that yellow is even more deadly than a red. Because at least with a red, when I tell people better decisions faster, the faster is through my equation, within 5 to 10 seconds, you'll know if it's a green, yellow, or red. That's the faster. It's not the end destination, but it's knowing the color of the light that can then inform your future strategy. Is this a green, yellow, or red? But that long-term yellow being more deadly than a red, you bleed out that time. Imagine it's a bad investment or a bad relationship, and you held on to the person or the thing for 5 years. At least a red light, excommunicado. It's out. It's done. Move forward, learn from it, and make a better decision the next time. But at least it's in the rearview mirror. Those yellows that linger where your head is on and your heart will never join for the party, those are the silent killers.
I want to thank Paul Epstein on this topic of how to make decisions, really fast. The book is Better Decisions Faster. What a great title. Boom, boom, boom. Just right in the pocket. Power playing offense. Let's be assertive and learn the leader's playbook for personal team transformation. Here's an easy decision as we finish up the show. I often find that people are confused between defining moments and inconsequential moments. They'll sit, I get behind these people at 31 Flavors and like, what should I get? And they think it's like they're choosing a life decision. People go to McDonald's and my kids know exactly what they want, but the people in front of us, it's all garbage. Just pick one, right? Make a decision. And the life-changing decisions, what I would call a defining moment, they miss them. They, like you bring home that girlfriend, that boyfriend, you want to say, hey, son, daughter, this is kind of a big one. And they kind of confuse the inconsequential moment with the defining moment. And they stress very, very huge over small decisions. And then when there's one that can change their life, they treat it as casual. So from my experience in observing that, I'm going to tell you something. Here's a real easy decision that you ought to really understand is defining perhaps whether. Not only can you get some time in Paul's head with his books, but he has some cool free stuff. He's got tools. He's got questionnaires. He's got stuff on his website, paulepsteinspeaks.com, that you can participate in and contact with him. There's no risk to that type of stuff because it's free. And when you have no downside and only upside, shoot, that's head, heart, 10 seconds. That's pretty easy to get the hands going on the mouse and go to paulepsteinspeaks.com. Because here's the thing, just as he went to a leadership retreat and it was the defining moment, he probably didn't go there realizing his whole life could change into something glorious, beautiful, find his calling. You don't know what he has. I'd go find out what it is. So build your library, get stuff done, learn to make decisions. It's a skill. It's empowering. We can get better at it. We can take control of our lives. I'll give you the last word, Paul. What do you got? Last word in this crazy world that seems to be kind of different post-COVID. What's your counsel for people as we part?
You said it best earlier, Andy, that the environment, we can't control it. So why would we lose our energy because of it? To me, that's just the defensive environment. And to play offense, it's focusing on what do you control, your mindset, your energy, your attitude, your effort. Like I could just say this, there's 3 table stakes to winning in life: awareness, ownership, and intention. I'll repeat that: awareness, ownership, and intention. And if you can step into each day with elevated awareness, you can own both the good and the bad. And then you attack each day with the intention to win one day, one decision, one action at a time. That's how we play offense, investing and beyond.
Fantastic. You've had the chance to listen to Paul Epstein. This is how to make better decisions. His book is Better Decisions Faster, coming out this year, 2023. And his first book, The Power Playing Offense, a leader's playbook for personal and team transformation, available now. His website, paulepsteinspeaks.com. We hope you've enjoyed the conversation. I look forward to each and every episode. Again, I'm your host, Andy Tanner. This is where we do our best to make investing decisions, personal development simple. We'll see you guys next time.
You've been listening to the Cash Flow Academy podcast with Andy Tanner. For more information on investing made easy, go to thecashflowacademy.com.